Welcome back, chess fans. Today I'm going to go over a game played by two of the most beloved players in chess, Bobby Fischer and Mikhail Tal. These two ferocious players clashed only a couple of times, and we're going to go over one of these games in this episode. So grab your popcorn and let's go. So the year is 1959 and we're in Bled, Slovenia, and in this game Mikhail Tal is playing against Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer at the time was 16 years old, and it's actually crazy, he was 16 and already playing in the candidates tournament, which was just simply unheard of in that era, and even nowadays that doesn't usually happen, even though we have a Gukesh as the champion. But here we have a game where these two chess giants played each other, and actually Bobby Fischer really struggled against Mikhail Tal early on in his career. He beat Tal a couple of times towards the end when he started to peak as a chess player and when he was reaching his peak, but Mikhail Tal beat him quite a few times when Bobby Fischer was still up and coming. So this is the game that I wanted to show you guys, and here we go. Let me just quickly do a game review because the game analysis didn't do a game review here. So here Tal opens up with pawn to d4, knight to f6, c4, g6. Tal plays knight to c3, bishop g7 and e4. So we get the standard King's Indian defense by Fischer. Fischer really loved these sorts of systems. He played these King's Indian systems both with black and the white pieces. And he had a lot of success against a lot of players, but not against Tal, though Tal was truly an exceptional player. So here Fischer castles, knight to f3, and pawn to e5 chosen by Fischer. Pawn to d5, taking more space, not allowing the capture on d4. Knight to d7 and bishop to g5. Both sides are just simply developing here, nothing crazy going on. Black's plan here is to put the knight on c5, reinforce it with a5 so b4 does not kick it out, and eventually this knight that's on f6 will be moved away somewhere, either e8 or h5. Of course you have to make sure your queen's not hanging, and then f5 is going to be Black's plan, trying to attack on the king side. Meanwhile white will be trying to attack on the queen side. So here h6 chosen by Black, bishop to h4 or h6, and now a6 chosen by Fischer. So Fischer went for a non-standard approach in this position. Generally the line that I showed you, f5, or the idea that I showed you, f5, is what's commonly prepared here, and actually Fischer did end up playing that move later on in this game, but he also wanted to potentially play this move pawn to b5, which opens up this side of the board. It opens up queen side, and there is tremendous pressure over here. Now these sorts of gambits with a6 b5, they're generally better for the white pieces, but there is always some sort of nagging pressure. There's some form of compensation, and it's sort of a very Benko gambit like idea. So that's what Fischer was going for with this move. Here Tal just castled, and queen to e8 was chosen by Fischer, simply unpinning because he wants to move the knight and play the move f5 later on. Knight to d2 chosen by Tal. The idea of this move is that there are some lines where white plays b4 and then knight to b3, and the knight on b3 is very useful because it supports the c5 pawn push. Also, if b4 c5 is played even earlier, sometimes this knight can go to c4 to further pressure d6. So this is a very flexible move, and you will see what Tal did with this knight later on. So knight to h7 chosen by Fischer, pawn to b4, Tal simply expanding on the queen side, and bishop to f6 chosen by Fischer, trying to trade off some pieces. So Tal obliges, takes on f6, knight takes f6, and then knight to b3, Tal prepares c5 once again. Queen to e7, stopping c5 because now the queen also protects this square. Queen to d2, developing the queen with a tempo because it attacks the h6 pawn. Here Fischer defends, and then queen to e3. So once again, notice how everything revolves around this pawn break, c5. And this is what happened on the next move. Tal plays it, and now he will be able to generate some pressure on this side of the board. So here Fischer strikes back with f5, though. He's not just going to allow Tal to do whatever he wants. captures on f5, captures on f5, and Tal responds with pawn to f4, striking back, not allowing white to advance with f4. So Fischer captures on f4, and here queen takes f4. The bishop is not hanging, by the way, it's defended by the knight, so this is simply very strong for the white pieces. But now this is when the fireworks began. So first of all, Fischer captured the pawn on c5. And here, instead of recapturing, instead of going after c7 maybe or anything like that, Tal plays bishop to d3. Now this is inaccuracy. This is an inaccuracy, but it's not really that bad of a move. You're attacking this pawn, and the king on h7 is feeling very uncomfortable here because once it gets kicked away from this h7 square, it's going to go onto the dark squares, and it is basically, you can check it a lot of times, and it's very dangerous for the black pieces. So bishop d3 is hardly an inaccuracy. So Fischer continues though. He continues with capturing these pawns. Rook to e1 chosen by Tal, bringing his final piece that he hasn't moved into the game with a tempo on the queen. Queen to f6, and here Tal sacrifices the knight on c3 and simply continues with his attack, playing rook to e6. Now it was actually best to go for bishop takes f5 and just simply grab a pawn, but you know, you can't tell anything to Mikhail Tal. He's gonna sacrifice something in a game. Like, even if he doesn't have to, he will sacrifice something. So he played rook to e6, still a very strong move. There's still massive amounts of pressure on the board. Fischer captured the knight on c3, which is a complete blunder, and it is a blunder for a very specific reason. Here Tal captures the pawn on f5, finally attacking the king on h7, and here Fischer sacrificed his rook because he realized how dangerous this bishop was as an attacker. Because if you simply go back to h8, there's so much pressure here. Like, you're getting absolutely checkmated. Like this, for example, is going to lead to very, very quick checkmate. If you go to g7, this also doesn't work because there's various rook g6, queen g4, moves like that. This is just extremely dangerous. Actually, rook g6 is just very clean because it straight up just transposes into the same position if the king goes over here to h8. But if he goes to f7, well, you know, this is not safe to say the least. So this is not what Fischer chose. He didn't move the king. He sacrificed the rook, got rid of one of the strongest attackers in the white position. Of course, Tal captures the rook on f5 with a check. King moves to h8, and now at least there's no attack on h6, so that's good, but it still doesn't do much. So here Tal continues attacking with this move, rook to f3. Now this is a multi-purpose move. First of all, it lifts the rook. The upside of this move, or not really the upside, what you have to make sure when you play a move like rook f3 is that you're not getting checked. And if we look at all the queen moves here, c5 and d4 are covered by the knight. a1 and c1 are also covered by the knight, and e1 is covered by the rook. So there's no checks that this black queen can give. And of course e3 is covered, you know, multiple times. And once you play rook f3, you have lots of flexibility with this rook. You can go to h3, you can go to g3, and then continue attacking here. You have sacrifice ideas, so this is just a very strong move. Because you can bring the rook over here, bring the rook over here, and it is just absolutely devastating. So here, queen to b2 was played by Fischer, and rook e8 played by Tal. Absolutely fantastic move. Once again, pinning the knight, but also pinning the bishop as well. Because if this bishop ever moves, the rook will be hanging on on a8. So this is not such a simple move to deal with. If you play a move like knight to b6, defending the bishop at the same time, moving the knight and defending the bishop at the same time, this is still not going to work because rook takes g8. The rook will take on g8, and then this king will be hunted out, I believe, with queen to e7 here, and there's some sort of mate, like something like this, I believe. Not even h4. What was the correct move here? It's, yeah, rook g3, bishop g4, h4, stuff like this. I believe queen f4, threatening rook h3 checkmate, and this will be just mate in a couple of moves. once black runs out of all the checks. So this is what would have happened if knight to b6 had been played. So as you can see, rook takes g8 is a big threat. So what Bobby Fischer decided to do here is to go with knight to f6. So he wanted to defend this knight, but this does give up a piece. It gives back the piece to Tal. Tal takes it, queen takes f6, queen takes f6, and then rook takes f6. The knight is still pinned, by the way, so the rook is not hanging. And after king to g7 here, rook to f8 chosen by Tal. Now the knight is under attack once again. The bishop is also under attack, and the bishop is also pinned forever because it just will not be able to move because the rook will be hanging on the a8 square. So knight to d7 knight to e7 played by Tal, or Fischer, sorry. Knight to a5 chosen by Tal. And here what Tal does is he starts remaneuvering this knight to the center of the board to try to get rid of Fischer's knight with a move like rook f7. Because if you take this knight right away, the problem is the rook is hanging on f8. So you don't want to take this right away. So what Tal found here was a way to maneuver the knight and control this f7 square. So that's what he does. So first he played h4, fixing this pawn on h5. Rook to b8, even though it really wasn't that necessary, to be honest. He just sort of played this move because why not? Rook to b8 played by Fischer, knight to c4, pawn to b5, and here knight to e5. The threat is very clear. The threat is rook to f7 here, and if the knight ever moves, then of course the bishop will fall. So there's nothing more to be done in this position, and this is where Bobby Fischer resigned the game. So absolutely phenomenal victory achieved in the 1959 candidates tournament, which Tal would actually go on to win to challenge Mikhail Botvinnik for the world championship, which ultimately he ended up winning as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this game. I will continue uploading this sort of rivalry between Bobby Fischer and Mikhail Tal, because these are two very beloved players in the chess community, both ferocious attackers, both extremely dynamic, and yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to this series as much as I am. So this is where I'm going to end it for today, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.